Hi everyone, welcome to DocuSpace Episode 7, Work in Progress. I'm your host, Robbie.
And I'm your host, Joseph. I'll let our guests introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Veronica. It's nice to be back. Thanks for having me.
Hi, it's Karina. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you guys. I'm glad you guys could make the time for us today.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll give a bit of intro about what the discussion will be about today. So today's episode is work in progress, and we'll be talking about, generally changes that we faced as young professionals and designers in the workforce or in school, or pivoting or changing and evolving. So yeah, and also in general about how like life is changing as well, since we're getting we're getting further along in life and our careers. So yeah, I guess the first question or the first thing we could probably think about is about like how we've changed since graduating from school. I think honestly throughout life, there's very few times where I'm like super introspective of like exactly where I am. But I think now that I'm in my career, I'm like, wow, I have to actually like have some kind of trajectory about it more. School felt a bit more automatic. Like, you do kindergarten, then the next thing, then the next thing, then high school, then college. Like it's all very pre-planned. And then our careers are like, or I've seen people really make huge changes. People are leaving architecture, coming into it. So yeah, it's very exciting.
You know what annoys me about that though? Oh my gosh, the first thing I'm saying is what annoys me. It's in every phase of that life, people tell me that the next phase will get better. Have you guys faced that?
Yeah.
No, the best phase is college, and it's over. That's what I've been
Someone told
told.
me the truth.
No,
Lord.
but I disagree. I think this phase is a lot better than the previous ones.
Yeah. I think honestly that the excitement of it is also sometimes the fear of it as well.
Yeah.
It feels like anything can happen. So then in some ways it's like I should be doing more.
Yeah,
But then,
switching that mindset
yeah.
of like, this is what I have to do because that's what everyone tells me to do, versus this is what I'm gonna do because this is what I want to do. It's a lot. I'm
Yeah,
still
totally.
getting there.
And
Yeah, I
sometimes
feel like
yeah.
yes.
No,
I
go.
was just gonna say that for me, like I think what changed the most is probably that I used to think that by this time or like by next year I will have it figured out, but what changed is that now I know that I'm not gonna have it figured out, and that's okay
Ever?
too.
Yeah.
Ever, or this year, next year?
It's like a
No,
moving target,
ever.
honestly.
It's
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
That's
A work
actually
in
very
progress.
cool. So what you've done is you've become adaptable to change, which is really cool.
That's a really
That's the
nice way of
way.
putting that.
Yeah, just being at more at peace with it. I think Joseph and I were talking about how like human change is and how we should be kind to ourselves about this idea of change, because sometimes you just like life passes you by and you're not really living in it, and we're just so caught up in everything else that's going on to just be aware of like, hey, this is happening, and hey, I'm dealing with it, and this is going to continue to happen, so I need to be more kind to myself about it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so true, but it's just a really hard thing to practice.
Exactly, yeah.
I feel.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think to your point, like, so I guess I'm going through one of my last, I keep on saying my last one, my last school phase. So I'm gonna go start grad school
Mm,
in like a
No
month.
you say that
PhD.
now.
You don't
I
know.
said I
The
wouldn't go to grad
PhD is
school when I
coming.
graduated. I was like, I'm so burnt out. I don't want to look at a classroom again. I'm
Yeah.
out peace. 2 years later, I'm like, it's not that bad. Like, I could do it again. But
Like you actually realize that the reality is way more bleak than being in school.
it's funny. I talk about that with a really, really good friend all the time. Like the pros and cons of school versus work, where it's like school is so like warm. It's like you're in a nice bubble. Everybody has the same ideas and there's an energy and creativity. And then work is like a lot more freedom, but at the same time, you're kind of like on your own. Things are so little predetermined. And I guess it's more fun in that way, right? Like I don't have to worry about like studio or whatever. Once I leave
Yeah.
work, I have left work. This is now like completely detached. Yeah, but I'm like, I think in my head I've been kind of going back and forth. Like, yeah, I'm so happy to be going to grad school. And other times like, should I really be going to grad school? Because I feel like sometimes it's like a means to an end. Like I do know in my
Yeah.
head what I want to be doing in the end goal. I just don't have no clue how to get there. So I'm like, okay, I'll go to grad school and hopefully that'll get me a bit closer to getting there. But yeah, like what are we saying? Like sometimes you have to be kinder to ourselves that we are just figuring it out, and things take time.
You know, like I've been thinking about this a lot lately, that I feel like, yeah, school is overwhelming, but you don't really think so much about whether or not uh different aspects of your life are meaningful or fulfilling to you, because you feel like you're doing this bigger thing. At least
Yeah, yeah,
that was true for me. But then when you work, and then you can't really find that fulfillment in work, and then you're also looking for maybe like, am I fulfilled outside of work? But then I don't know, it just
Mm.
feels a lot more overwhelming than being in school, in my opinion. So I don't think you're it's yeah, going to grad school, I think it's gonna be an exciting new chapter, because you're also probably going into it with um expectations that are closer to the reality after going through undergrad before. So it's not gonna be as
yeah.
much of a culture shock, I guess.
I think so.
And it's not
Yeah.
going to be as long, right? The 5 years of architecture
Yeah,
school versus
yeah.
what, 2 years of grad
2 years
school?
exactly.
I think two is manageable.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Like I almost went to a 1 year program. So I'm going to Harvard
Mm,
for the grad school program there. And it was between Harvard and Columbia. Columbia's like 1 year. And initially I was very happy about that. I was like, okay, that's 1 year, so I can get back to my life.
yeah.
Faster. And then I thought about it some more and I was like, 1 year is so short. Like,
No.
like if I'm gonna do it, like might as well really do it. And I think
Yeah.
it's some things about like the hangups of thinking that there's like things that you should be doing. And I think when I was in school, it was a lot easier. I had very, very little pressures about like how long things take me to do. I'm like, okay, I'll finish when I finish. But now I'm like, I'm trying to give myself a bit of a calendar. And I
Mm,
think that's helpful in some ways, but in other ways, it sort of makes me lose the point of what I am doing, what I'm doing. Right. Like it becomes more about the goal and not necessarily about the why. And sometimes
mm,
like, over the course of decisions I've made, sometimes like the why changes. So then the goal doesn't make sense anymore. So it's, still trying to be malleable while we're doing that, I
yeah.
guess.
Yeah. I mean, Kara and I visited the Villanova Artigas architecture school. Um, and then when we were there, we were just, it was so beautiful. I was like, oh, it was wow. Um, and then
We spent way too long in that building.
we did. And then
Yeah. It's like
um,
over an hour.
Is that one of the Kalimina buildings or oh sorry, Lena
It's
boarding
the
buildings, or was it not?
no, Artigas.
Oh,
Villanova Artigas University building,
gotcha. Okay.
architecture and urban faculty.
In the University of Sao Paulo. Um,
Yeah.
and throughout our time there, we were just we were just weirdly nostalgic about school. And then we talked about things we would do differently, or things we didn't do. And I'm like, yes, possibly we could do better when we do go to grad school, but then there's also this reality of things that, maybe we won't do better. Maybe we will go back in our original cycles and see where that takes us. What I'm trying to say is that even if you do go back to that mentality, it's okay. It's okay. It's like we're so new at this. I think we're like it's been 2 3 years since we've graduated and like started real life, and it's just so fast paced that it's okay if we're like just figuring it out for a bit. So don't expect to go in there and be like, I got this. You don't, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be it's a real big transition. But I think the biggest thing of why I didn't want to go to academia again, well, when I left undergrad, I was like, I feel like sometimes academia is so self-serving. Like there's a lot of things that are done in academia for the sake of academia. And I think
Mm.
having been in work, the biggest thing I've learned about myself is like I really do want to touch people, like their hearts, their minds.
Touch
I have to
people.
correct that really quickly.
I think you have to elaborate.
Yeah, but good grief, that was awful.
Mm,
So yeah, and I think like in school, like it was very hard to even like, and I think a lot of schools struggle with this, where they have such a hard time trying to integrate the school into the city or the context. And I think every school's trying to do it, but like it's really, really hard to do it. And in work, at least, even by the virtue of just having a job in the city, you're meeting people that are there and you're getting to, learn about their dreams, their goals, their aspirations, how you're playing a role in that. And that's something that's super special. And I feel like in school, like that's always like a theoretical thing. It's like theoretically, if I do this, then this theoretically happens. Right. And I think, there's a lot of great work that gets done in school, but it's so hard to translate those ideas into the real world and actually like see if they would work or not and those things. So for
Yeah.
me, I'm really, really trying to make it so that I'm in school, but I'm also just as much like in Cambridge, just as much in Boston, just as much in Massachusetts, and actually like still living outside of school as well.
No, I so relate to this actually. Like it's probably the most frustrating thing about it. But I feel like going to grad school, like you're cognizant of like the trap of, falling into academia, the naivete of academia. But I think, it's not impossible to keep your connection to reality because also it's only 2 years as opposed to
Yeah,
like
exactly.
the 5 years when you like go into school and you kind of like grow up in this bubble with these other people. But now like I think grad school in my mind is also like more of a choice than it is undergrad. Like you are sure of this decision for yourself. So I think it is going to be different in a way. But yeah, that's something I also struggle with personally. um, how to balance my interest in academia and how I find it's like increasing gap between the topics I enjoy researching and writing about and how the real world operates.
Mhm. Personally, a change that I've seen in myself since I have graduated, and maybe this is something everyone resonates with, is just that I have more faith in myself. Um, and it could come from like faith in an institution, which I hate to say, but sometimes I'm like, oh, I graduated from this school. People think it's a good
What
school.
school, Ravi? I've been told we should use our credentials. What school?
Cornell
Actually, yeah, we all went to
University.
Cornell at the time, the best architecture school in the country. I'm not sure how we're
But not
doing
anymore.
now.
Not anymore.
And I like to
What
pretend
is
I
it?
don't
What
care,
is
but I really
now?
do.
No, no,
Please
last
What are
continue.
the
was number 22. Don't quote me.
No,
Hey,
that
it's went
wasn't
up
an
since then, actually.
architecture. That wasn't an architecture.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, good to
Yeah, that was a different ranking. Yeah. I don't think we could have dropped that quickly,
know.
right?
One
I also
no,
think this.
Okay, sorry to derail you, Ravi. Yeah, your point.
it's just I believe in myself more when I make certain decisions because I'm like, I think my school would have done a good job in equipping me with certain skills, I would like to think. Um,
Would have. Lord.
um, and then it's also like because you worked with yourself for like 5 years and then you enter the workforce, I feel you become a little more like you kind of have to become a little more, hey, I need to do this. I'm making this decision and trusting yourself with it or trusting yourself with a creative process a little more. Um, knowing what to do, maybe well, Kara knows this more than me, but like what colors go together or what doesn't, what words to say, just having a little bit more faith in yourself in that way. And then another thing that I learned after I entered the workforce is to work with other people. Because in school we're in such a bubble, and I mean they try to put us in group projects, but does that really work? It's like one group breaks up at the end of the
The
semester.
divorce
I
rates of
think
group projects are astronomical. It's terrible.
Yeah.
yeah. So it's just trusting others. Well, you usually trust yourself with finishing work, but like just trusting others around you to work with you, I feel is something that I learned after I entered the workforce. And it was really hard to learn
That's
personally.
so interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because you don't like you're not like pitted against each other with your coworkers in a way that like maybe as students we were by some of our tutors?
I honestly don't even think it was the tutors. I think students were doing that to themselves. Like,
Hmm.
I,
I think,
mhm.
I'm sorry, but
No,
I
go for
think
it.
you
Yeah.
still have a lot to fight for in undergrad, like competitions, internships, portfolio, favors of professors, getting into certain classes. Like the fact that you
Yeah.
have to go to
Yeah.
your first class and then
That's
pitch why
true.
you're
Hunger
going to be
Games,
taking it. It's
really.
like, I already
Sorry.
applied to this school. I got in. Why do I have to keep applying for every single elective I'm taking? And I think like at work, Well, I think there's two things. It's like you're no longer working on your personal project and you get a little bit detached. So there's more leeway of like, oh, I'm gonna work on this, you work on this, because maybe your interests are different as well. So it's like
Yeah.
with like Rabbi said, maybe I want to choose the colors, but she wants to choose the font or something.
Yeah.
So I think there's just like more place to work and you are less thinking about everything you have to achieve, and ticking like all the boxes to get to the next step
Yeah. I mean,
for
there's
me.
also that mentality, right, where you're like, oh, why don't want to delegate? I can probably do it faster myself. But the importance of delegating is so, like, it takes time to trust and delegate, or like
Mm.
in that way, it's really difficult. It's just because you're right there. I think there's like an individualistic mentality that we're in, or like when we're in school, and also that we do have to fight for things. And it's so ridiculous how like the elective shopping, people's like the elective period where you pick your electives called like, oh, I'm shopping for an elective, and I'm like, no, this is not shopping. Shopping's
Shopping.
easier.
This is war. What do
They're
you mean?
shopping for you.
This is a Birkin bag. What am I doing?
But it's also weird because like technically the semester has already started, and if you take out
Yeah,
of
yeah.
department classes, you already have readings, you already have writings, you already have to kind of get into that mindset of I'm doing work. And then on the other half of your classes are still kind of like up there, undecided.
Professors are like, I like you. No, you, no. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't really do a good job of, I don't know, yeah, like mediating all our different creative egos. Whereas in the workplace, I feel like you kind of just have to fall in line sometimes. And
Mhm.
yeah, like there isn't so much space to have as much ego
You
as,
have to rise up the ranks a little bit before your ego can
yeah,
resurface.
yeah. You have to put something down on the table.
For sure, for sure. I think like as someone who really, really struggled in architecture school, like really badly. Like I remember first year was honestly
Really?
pretty traumatic. But yeah, like my first semester especially like was awful. I think I got the lowest grade you could get at the time, which was like a B minus. At least I heard they don't give you anything lower than that. And like knowing that and getting a B minus, like, oh Lord, this is awful. And I was so embarrassed. And then like it just became about doing better than that and like feeling like I belonged. And I think with how competitive our class was, especially like there was so much so many attachment things I had about like getting a certain grade in studio. Like I was doing fine in my other classes, like I was perfectly fine, but studio became like my self-worth, you know. And so I was like, I'm not a B minus, I can't be that. And like sacrificing so much, like sacrificing sleep, sacrificing commitment to the classes, sacrificing mental health to get to this point. And the very first really good crit I had, like I remember the chair of our school was there, and like I've really never forgotten it. Like it was, I didn't sleep the night before, and literally you wouldn't be able to tell. I was so happy. But to your point about like how school has like molded us to be individualistic, I think for me, as opposed to being more, I guess, controlling about things at work, like it was a lot harder for me to ask for help on things because I became so self-sufficient. Like I kept on thinking I have to do this on my own, right? This is my task. I need to finish it. And my boss is like, I remember like the first 6 month thingy, he was like, so what do you think you could improve? And I was like, yeah, there's been a lot of close calls because I didn't properly communicate it. I needed help on something. Right. Because I thought I had to finish it on my own. And it's been so liberating to like let go of that more and more. Right. Because like it's one thing to know it, but it's another thing to actually actively practice it and to ask for more questions and to just know that like not everything hinges on just me, right? It's a job at the end of the day. And all that matters is we finish it. It doesn't matter who did what exactly.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's another thing that we may have noticed change, bringing back to the topic in ourselves. Like asking for help, really, because now at work you have people you can actually rely on, or people you can communicate time constraints with. Because imagine communicating time constraints with a professor. You can't. You have to do it.
They'll challenge your doctor's appointments. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
setting boundaries, honestly. That, yeah, definitely that's a big change.
yeah, no, just once at work, or I mean, I knew I could, they gave me something that I knew I could do in 10 minutes, and they were expecting me to do it in 10 minutes. I had to update a core in a building. And then they were like, okay, how quickly can you do this? And I was like, I need 30 minutes. And then everyone just looked at me and were like, 30 minutes? are you sure that's too much time? You can do it early. And I was like, no, you're gonna give me 30 minutes for this. Because there's so many things that could go wrong, and I need to double, triple check that it's okay. And yes, at the end of the day, I did it in 10 minutes that everyone knew, and I knew that I could do it in 10 minutes, but I was just like, you can't put that pressure on me. I need my time. So just the fact that I went out and asked for it is something that I couldn't see myself do in like school. Like, you know, hey, this is very realistic and this needs to happen, or like just going up to people and asking for help. 'Cause sometimes it's really as dumb as the printer's not working and you just need to walk up to somebody and be like, hey, can you help me print this? Whereas at school, like we're doing printing at such a stressful time that no one can really help you print because everyone's printing. So yeah, I feel like asking for help, trying to be more reliant on others, having a little bit more faith in yourself are all things that I've noticed. And maybe we're all doing better at since we graduated school. Like it's stuff that maybe we do become better at as we do enter the workforce. Yeah.
Or those knowing smiles you guys just gave.
It's like, are we doing
Yeah.
better? Do I have boundaries?
Like, what have you?
Nice to tell ourselves to sleep at night, you know.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I think actually I was positively surprised the few times I did ask for extensions, especially towards the end of school. I think as we got older, professors are treating us also a little bit more like adults. And every time I asked, I got it. And then every time I regretted it, it was because I didn't ask. So it's just kind of, yeah, it's an internal change. It's not even something that is like the difference between academia or real world, I think. So for grad school, you should ask.
The worst they can say is no. That's my
Yeah.
mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, like I think the way that like I think the way that we've changed is also affected. At least I think I can say that with a bit of confidence to change how we look at design a little bit more. Because I remember like, and I know we've referenced school a lot because literally I was there like 2 years ago, but like I think learning the sense of ownership, like what Carol was kind of alluding to, right? Like I think first 2 years, it's like the professor says it, I do it. There's very few instances of like me actually like arguing for my point and like, you know, learning to have ownership of my work, right? It was very much like student professional. And like you're saying, like as the years went by, I felt more comfortable to just disregard advice if I really didn't believe in it or try something that I, you know, was told not to and just learn the hard way that way. But then I think, you know, with those changes and more ownership, like design has also changed for me a lot, right? Like I don't think I had like necessarily an inkling of like what I wanted design to be for myself. You know, I know people would ask me like, oh, so what kind of architecture do you want to do? You want to do residential or like commercial or like, you know, infrastructural? And I remember like not really knowing, I'm like, I'm not sure if like I have to choose like in that way. But now it's like I do have a type of architecture I want to do, but not necessarily like the type of building, right? But like the type of changes. Definitely have learned that I really do want to do architecture that is more, you know, centered on the human and communities and, you know, more towards like marginalized communities, especially. I think, and also trying to figure out a way that I can kind of work that into my, you know, my homeland in Ghana. I don't know how that's all going to converge, but that's kind of like something that's become super clear to me over time. And I'm not sure what to call that necessarily, right? But I think, you know, that's how design has changed for me. And I'm kind of curious to hear for you guys, like, you know, how design has changed for you in terms of how you see it and perceive it.
I agree. I was always very confused why I have to choose building typology as something that will define my next 50 years of career as an architect. And I think, yeah, in the last 2 years as well, I realized that there are certain projects that I'm more interested in, but they're because of how they affect the people who use the spaces and not necessarily the size of it or the type of it.
It's yeah, it's a really good question because I think it's still changing for me in the sense that I'm like kind of in the process of trying to expand what design means to me because the master's that I've done was not like strictly design, it was called like research architecture. So I feel like I had to go through this process where I tried to like justify to myself and to others as well, I guess, that this range of things that I produce in my work, which is, not strictly architectural, still counts as design. So I guess for me that has been the biggest change, because also now, like, yes, I earn my wage labor is architectural design, but it's not the only thing that I do. So yeah, I think for me, I'm like trying to broaden this category. Yeah.
Same as Veronica, my relationship with, or like what I think about design is still changing. Um, I think I've generally moved away from like calling myself an architect, just an architect, and like more being more open to the term designer, and how a designer is such a more broad term that I can relate to a bit more. And like we mentioned this so many times before, but it's just I am interested in production design, and the next step for me is going to film school eventually. But I'm also very aware when I'm thinking about that is that architecture is something that I can come back to. It's going to be a part of everything that I do. And I'm not leaving anything behind, even if I do study something else. And like it's going to be an integral part of something else as well. I think what generally I'm trying to say is that it has become like more, the term architect or design has just become a much, since I've graduated, has become much more broad for me, which I think is what we're trying to do with this podcast as well, right? We're trying to say that, oh, it's not just buildings, it's more than that. It's urban spaces, built environment. Every part of our life has design, and I just feel that I'm slowly becoming more attuned to what I'm saying. Like I'm trying to put it in action too. Yeah.
And like you're saying, like change is so unclear, right? Like sometimes I think we know what you're trying to get to, but other times you just know where you are is not where you're gonna stay, and things change like randomly. And I think in a meta way, this podcast, like I've learned so much. Like I think you know, having already released the first episode and getting so much feedback, and having to like also like look within ourselves, because I think before we thought like, we had a whole year before we actually released anything, and in that time there's a lot of thinking and like back and forth. It's this, it's not this, it's this, it's not this. And now it's a little bit unclear as to what it is necessarily, but I think that's kind of good. Like what Rebby's saying, like we're trying to we know where we've started, but we're trying to make more than that. And exactly where it's gonna land and how the pieces are gonna fall together are things that we're trying to depressurize more and more. So hopefully everybody's, giving us grace in that way. I'll be like, so what is it about? Like, what are you trying to do? Like, is it architecture? Is it not architecture? Yeah, and I think like what Rebby's saying, like where we are, more than the sum of our parts, right? Like we're architecture people, we're from all these different backgrounds and trajectories. But at the end of the day, our experiences go beyond that. And I think like something that I really loved about history class in school, especially, was like we always learned a lot about the person before we talked anything about the ideas. Like we would talk about their childhood, whether they went to war or not, like their personal grievances. And I remember in school, I was like, this is so cool. Like before we even talked about what this guy did or what he believed, like we actually know who he is as a person more. And in a weird way, it's like it made so much sense. I'm like, why doesn't history always do that? Like, why don't we get more personal about it? Because that becomes who we are, and that becomes how we live and what we believe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you're gonna learn a lot about us.
Yeah. I think we've talked about change in like a positive light for a while. Have we?
Let's make this a little darker.
That's true. I think what's also something we can talk about is just like sometimes change is unnatural, sometimes change is enforced. Um, be it like a rule changing at work, or how AI is being enforced upon everybody, and stuff like that. So sometimes enforced changes becomes really difficult to deal with. So what are your thoughts on that? Or am I just throwing everyone for a loop? Like how do you deal with something unexpected that comes your way and it's something that needs to happen? For me, it's like it could be like when the chair of architecture school changed. Again, for now. It changed in the last year that Joseph and I were in school. We were used to certain professors that were no longer there because the chair no longer wanted them there. And then we were in our thesis semester. So the point of thesis was to have like a professor who you have a relationship with already to work with, and then a lot of people were just working with professors who had just come up on board, and we didn't have proper relationships with, or we had to like create a relationship with them and then get to while working on thesis. So I know that it became a lot more overwhelming for people in that way. So
Yeah.
that was really hard time to go through. I think I'm talking as a year collectively because I've talked about this with a lot of my peers. So change in that way. And I also think that we are slowly becoming a little more, well, again, I'm sounding very positive about it, but there have been so many challenges that come our way in architecture school on the daily that we just like Vero, I said, like we become more adaptable to change. And I feel that maybe that's something life teaches us or school teaches us. And yeah, that in that area.
No, it's interesting that you bring up the change of guards at Cornell, because it started to happen after we left, so with Caro. So I don't know, it's like it was specifically a kind of change that I observed with scrutiny from afar. But I also don't want to fall into the trap of, there's always those people who are just like really not on board with change and new technologies and stuff, and then they kind of are left behind, and a couple of years after the change happens are laughed at for not keeping with the times. But um but specifically in architecture education, I not just architecture education, but I find this turn towards tech a bit concerning, because you can also see this in like broader university settings, that the humanities departments are getting defunded through this like at least in the UK, for example, like all the universities are going through this like horrible process of neoliberalization, and there's like no money in the humanities, there's only money in science and tech, supposedly. But then you are basically like getting rid of this um yeah, you're getting rid of training for people to who would then be able to critically engage with technologies and architectures and urban environments that we produce. And I think it's really important. And like personally, like this this is a point that I feel really strongly about, that we introduce like new technologies into society without like any scrutiny, and then it starts making big changes, and then we don't know how to react to them, and it's like, yeah, it's all like very like reactionary, as opposed to like, investing also in a more humanities kind of thinking as well. So like specifically at Cornell, I felt like for me personally, it was a slightly scary change of how a lot of professors whose work I looked up to were suddenly not getting renewed. And yeah, I don't know, a change of guards, I would say. Anyways, maybe that's a bit too specific.
No,
But
no, that was such a
That
good
was-
answer.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't know if I have much to add, but I loved it. So
Yeah, I think I really resonate with that, Vera, because like that's something I feel really strongly about. And every time I want to voice those opinions, I don't want to sound anti-tech. I think in a previous episode we kind of talked about AI a little bit. But I think sometimes there's this idea, and I think kind of to your point, Ravi, change can be negative sometimes, right? Like sometimes this idea of innovation for the sake of innovation without like thinking about why we're doing that innovation, right? Like I think technology will advance, and it's almost like an unstoppable train. What no matter what it's gonna go through or destroy, it just has to keep on going. There's money to be made. There's advancements to be made. And I think that is good. I can't say that enough. That is good that we're learning new things and figuring out new ways to, you know, like extend ourselves and to help people and to connect ourselves. I think that is good. The thing that I don't think is good is that we don't think about what that's going to do for everyone. Sometimes we kind of like think about the greater good a little bit, right? Like well, it's like the saying about like you can't make an omelet without cracking a few eggs, right? Like sometimes I don't think we should be making omelets. Like I think human lives and the way that people get to live, like as much as we can, we should try to prioritize the comfort and the validity of people's way of living, even if we disagree with them. And I think sometimes there's like this obsession of like, this is the good thing, and we've all decided it's good. And so if you get left behind, you get left behind, and there isn't any real leeway to actually figure out ways that we can actually, at the very least, lessen the blow on other people. And I think the whole AI thing, like artists specifically have been struggling the most because of it. Right, a lot of people have had more to gain. Like people in academia are like using it for research papers, and there's a lot of things that have been gained. But like with AI, like a lot of people are losing the sense of ownership for things that they've crafted over the entire time of their life. And it's like, oh, okay, well, now this thing can maybe take it and spit something out, and I had no say in it. Okay, great. Like F me. What do I get to do?
Yeah, but we need more people who maybe have like a bit of a more humanities brain or I don't know, character to also understand the technology. So I don't know. I mean, we need more like interdisciplinary thinking,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, but no, yeah, I
And
feel
small
you.
point I want to add to is like I feel like in architecture there's like this real stretching of the individual. Like it feels like you have to know like 20 softwares to be relevant sometimes, right? Like if you want to change
Yeah,
from one job to another, it's like we don't use any of the stuff you used over there. Like, do you have any of this
yeah.
stuff? And I'm like, like there's like new programs that are coming out. I already feel like obsolete. I've been out of school for 2 years. And sometimes like I think I have to like remind myself that there are more modes of operating than just that one that seems to be prevailing. Like, and that's what I really like about working in my firm as a smaller firm. Like, it's very like curtailed to a very certain way of thinking. And I guess in that way, like, you might not agree with the things that my firm does, so maybe you won't work there. But like for me, it works for me in that like it's more, slower paced, a little bit more thoughtful about like community and like what things really mean, and also like trying to get super deep about designing buildings, because I think sometimes the detail is lost for the bigger picture, but in at least
Mm.
for my firm it's kind of the inverse, where we're always trying to focus on the detail of things. So not necessarily about the detail of society, but also like how did this building actually come together, and will it actually make sense? Yeah, so I think that's like a little thing on it, add is like the stretching of like I have to know all these skills, but
Yeah.
maybe I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I really resonate with what both of you said. Like there's none of us are anti-tech. Like we want the world to progress in that way. It's just I wish there was more humanity attached to the way we're progressing, or like it was more human centric the way we're progressing. Like maybe AI doesn't have to take up creative jobs. Maybe it can take up other jobs that make the human that will assist in making the human brain more creative in some way. Like, maybe someone will get an idea on how to do that. But this progress is scary personally to me because it is taking a lot of creative power away from us. And being creative to me is what makes us human, I feel. And yeah, this is scary, but we got this.
I
And
think
in
it's like
in
really a question of ethics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was just wondering, in what way do you feel like it's taking your creativity, creative agency away? Because I mean, I don't really work in a traditional firm, and I was wondering, like, has AI made its way into your design process as well? Do you feel the change
No,
in that sense?
no, not in
Okay.
that sense yet. I mean, I do see like our firm's partners experimenting with AI in that way,
Mm,
where they would just like put prompts into whatever software they're using and be like, oh, come up with like a building, with like the firm name building, and add these elements to it. And then they would find these beautiful renderings that then they can just tweak to make it look like a building that my firm would generally do. And see, that's scary.
Isn't it a crazy way to go about design that the rendering comes before
Exactly.
Yeah,
anything
the final
else?
image.
And I mean, I know firms that actually do work like that, where they come with an
Mm,
image and then work backwards from it. It's just the image that is generated is your own image. It's not an image that's generated
mm,
something else.
I think that might be the difference between Rebby and I, because we work on different scale projects and also on different phases. And I feel like this would never work for my projects because we go to such a level of construction detail. And when you look at AI generated images, at least for now, as a whole, from afar, it looks okay. But then the closer you look, the more mistakes there are. So it doesn't really work all the way through a design process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think like that's why I
Mhm.
haven't really seen that in a professional setting.
Mm-hmm.
But I think also with like the fear of like losing your creativity, something that I've been struggling with as an architect or a designer is anytime I see someone do something cool, I'm like, I could do this. You know, like I don't need to buy this painting because I could paint it myself, or like I don't need to buy this like ceramic vase because I can make it myself. So there's this like level of like I can do all things creative, and then and that then transitions into I can profit from all the creativity that I do. So now I'm trying to create my own boundary where I want to go back to making things just for myself. And then the AI will not matter because it's just me with my sketchbook doing my own thing for my own pleasure and for like me wanting to feel human, right? So I don't think AI has to steal your creativity from you.
Yeah, I think you're totally right on that. Like, again, we're not against tech, but I think
No.
like AI is going to help architects a lot. It really will.
Yeah.
Like rendering times and all the tedious things we have to do will just be cut out.
Parking
Yeah,
lots. That's what I've been seeing all over
exactly. Like
LinkedIn.
I think it's gonna take out a lot of things that we don't care to do anyways. And then yeah, like what you're saying, like it's about tailoring what it does for us. So like it doesn't have to, right? It doesn't have to steal creativity. It's gonna be a matter of how it's implemented and you know.
Yeah. It's a lot of power, and I know that there's people who can separate the things, right? Like we can be creative and still have this tool, but I know that there's also a set of people who will just have this tool and would not want to do that. So in those hands, with great power comes great responsibility. I feel like this can go wrong very easily.
Yeah.
But,
And not to sound super pompous or anything, but I feel like some firms, it's almost like creativity is illegal there. Like, like you're not allowed to think. Because like, why would you do that? We don't know how that's gonna end. Let's do this thing we know exactly how it's gonna be like.
mhm.
And
You have a brand, no, that you have to uphold certain
exactly, yeah.
style.
And this is mostly coming from like anecdotes I've heard from friends in other firms. And I think this can happen at any scale of firm, honestly. It's just a matter of like who's in charge and what they're pushing the I guess the firm to look like. But that sometimes I think that's also a little bit of the reliancy of AI itself does kind of hurt creativity just because of the nature of that. And I think writing has struggled the most out of it, like out of the arts, right? Like writing has become very, very like reliant on AI already, like at least at the school level. And I'm probably even at the
Yeah.
work level too. So I think even outside architecture, like the way that all the creative fields are interfacing with AI is like it's changing so rapidly. I think even if it's not a matter of like, like what I want to do with AI versus what you want to do with AI, right? Like I think everybody should have that choice. I think that reliancy from society will inevitably create the shift. I don't know like what that's gonna look like. I can't say it's bad or good, but I think that's already happening where like, why write this essay where I have to think about all the words I choose? ChatGPT will do it. Like, and honestly, I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, right? Like, because I use it sometimes, like when I write something and I don't want to have to proofread it and check for all the grammar. I just put the entire essay in, check for my grammar, please. And then it does that, right? And then I can go back and decide whether I like how it changed the wordings of things or not. So I think like it is very useful, right? But like again, even my sense of reliance on it, I've become a bit more critical about it because I'm like, okay, like, I should still have that process because I think sometimes the tedium and the difficulty of things is part of the soul and essence of it. And once we make things super easy and automated, then you're kind of lost the point of the thing, right? Like sometimes the difficulty is part of the process. It's part of what makes it special.
Yeah. I think what we were also talking about was like just letting yourself fail, right? I'm
Mm.
not bringing this out of the blue, right?
A little bit, but that's fine.
um, no, just going off your point of just like trying something and then letting yourself fail and not giving up in that way. I think is also important, because we as designers have like so many directions that we can take when it comes to what we're doing. And sometimes the idea of change becomes so overwhelming that we don't even try things, or like embracing change becomes so overwhelming that we don't even try things. And in that way, I feel like just being more open to trying things and having them not work before they do work. Similarly, what we were saying about the podcast and how we're trying different things, and maybe some will work and some will not, and some maybe will fail massively, but you know, we'll learn something out of it. So
And we had fun doing it.
That's all
Yeah.
that counts.
yeah, and going off of the point of writers being very hurt by the introduction of AI, there were film strikes about this the whole of last year. The entertainment industry was like shut down, not producing at all, because writers were afraid that this was something that is going to hurt them. And they fought for the right. And I mean, there were negotiations. I don't know how they ended, but the strike has ended now, and I feel that where we can fight for something that we think we're losing. If this becomes too much, we as humans can always do that.
At the end of the day,
I
maybe
also,
talk.
yeah,
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I also think with writing and with films and yeah, the creative industries, I feel like yeah, individuals are going to suffer in the beginning with AI, but I also think in the long run, it's like I just can't see like creative professions disappear. I think we are gonna have to like reevaluate our relationship to the arts and maybe how we value the arts. But I definitely don't think it means that people are going to stop making because yeah, I think it's just going to change a little bit uh, in the sense that what we make and how we make that. But yeah,
Yeah.
Agree.
I
I
just
think the whole
I'm
yeah.
no.
Yeah, I think that like my concern, I guess, is like the money will change. It's
Yeah, I
like,
was about to
yes,
say.
we can still be creatives, but like it's already not the easiest place to freelance. Um, and then like how do you start pricing these? And then if you have two artists, one who's working with AI and one that isn't, one can work faster, or you can say that, oh, like I'm being, you know, tech savvy, like this is more
Mm,
high end in a way because it's more high tech. um so like once you have those differences, like how will that change the market? And like I don't have enough information about it, but I guess like that's where I'm mostly concerned. Mm.
Yeah.
no, it's true, but I think we are just going to have to adapt to that. Like I like you know in like early ages of AI when like AI couldn't really generate hands, and then there was like this trend between artists, digital artists specifically, is that like they would always feature like hands in their drawings, and I think like I think we are going to find a way to like differentiate between human made and AI made art somehow. That I don't know. I think it's going to become more sought after rather than
Mm.
devalued in the long term. But I think short term, definitely people are going to and are already probably suffering like financially from the change. But yeah.
Yeah. It's
I
definitely
love
going to be like a digital thing, especially too. Like I think walking around, I don't really notice it, but I go on social media, I'm like, wow, this is happening now. It's massive.
Mhm.
Definitely, and financially, that's gonna, what, it's all gonna pan out. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure, we'll adapt because we have to. But anyways, with that, I think we should probably lead to the wrapping up phase. I know this conversation probably has like another good hour in it, which is
Yes.
super exciting.
Yeah,
Want to say
I
I
wanted
love
to
the
loop
way
into so many things,
All right,
but it's
I'm like,
okay,
I can
it's
keep on
fine.
talking about this for all day.
Yeah,
Oh
but
yeah,
it's
we
another
should probably
time
wrap up and
over
get on with the rest of
coffee.
our days.
But
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that Veronica, I love the way you're putting it though, like to be hopeful about our ability in always being creators or makers, and that we will figure out our way around it. And I
We will
think,
never disappear.
yeah, we will not let ourselves disappear, I think.
No.
which is really beautiful. And yes, to conclude now, we're gonna ask our concluding question, but maybe with a little bit of twist, because I feel like we can ask this. It's just the concluding question has always been, what do you want the audience to take away from this conversation? But I also wanted to ask you guys, like, how do you think you want to change the world? So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And I mean, it's a huge thing. Like, how are you going to change the world? But it's like we're doing it in small bits.
One step at a time.
That's funny. It's all me.
So I can start, and maybe this
Yes,
will.
let's buy them some time. I think this is a pretty big question out of nowhere. Continue.
I think personally, and like one step at a time basis, I feel we change. Oh my God, I asked this question. I'm like, I think there's two different ways to deal with this. One, I feel like we're trying to change the world in the content that we're creating because it's meaningful content. But then we're also changing the world in the way that in every day in small instances where we're being more human, where we're being more transparent, where we're having difficult conversations, where we're not losing hope no matter which direction humanity is going. And yeah, I think that's my answer. And I tell this to people that there's this I'm not a very religious person. There's a sentence that I really deeply resonate to, and it's hopelessness is disbelief. So I never let myself be hopeless, no matter what I'm encountering, because hope is so important. Because hope leads to belief, and belief leads to action. And that's what I want people to take away.
That was very sweet.
That's kind of beautiful. Yeah, you're asking the hard questions at the very end, but yeah, I'm not sure if I have been trying to change the world really at this current moment in my life. But I think that's also okay. And because we are makers, so whatever we produce, it will ultimately change the world by little, either for the better or for the worse. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
This
that's
is a
totally.
kind of
I love
the
the
opposite to your hopefulness.
No, for sure.
But no, I mean, I think
It's valid.
I think because technology has been like kind of featured in this conversation a lot, I feel like what I would want people to take away from this is that to recognize that like technologies that we put out into society, including buildings, they do like impact and change social relations. So when we do produce those technologies, we should be aware of that. Yeah, and I think yeah, this is not I'm not sure how to conclude it nicely because yeah, it's a broad topic and yeah, it's hard to pin down just one thing. But
I
yeah, on
totally agree
to
with you, Vera.
Caro.
Like, I think I think like you're saying, like whether you're trying to or not, you are changing the world, right? Even if it's just one person. And I guess mine would be something kind of akin to what Vera alluded to. Sorry, Kara alluded to. Kara and Vera, so fun. Kara alluded to, which is that
We're 8 years
like
now.
I'm trying to, I guess, become more and I guess this is something that I always believe, like I think sometimes it's just good to be human, in the sense of not everything has to be transactional or monetary. And I get like, everybody has like the anti-capitalist thingy, like, okay, fine. But like I think even on just a more personal level, like, I like for my relationships to not feel necessarily that like there's something I have to gain from everything I do for someone else. And so, hopefully people won't feel like they have to gain something from everything they do for me. And I just feel like that's something that like makes life a lot easier for me. Right. I think sometimes there's friction with that where like, even for example, like I like to dog sit for people and they'll be like, I have to pay you for that. And I'm like, it's actually okay. Like it's okay. Like I'm doing this because I want to, and I don't need the monetary gain to feel that way even. Right. And I think on the bigger scale of things, like I just hope that in the world we can start to think like that a bit more, where not everything has to be for the what am I getting, what am I giving. It can just be, just living to live and doing things for yourself sometimes, or just doing something for someone else. purely just for that.
Yeah, I love that.
Dun dun dun, Carol.
Firstly, I really appreciate what Vero said, because when Ruby asked the question, I went into this like hyper optimism and like hyper success of like, this is the change, versus Vero, I feel like really grounded it. So I really appreciate that. In the best way possible.
Yeah.
And then as for me, I think like one thing is that yes, we produce a lot, and that can create change. But I think we don't realize how much of the work we do just gets forgotten and disappears. Even looking at creating a portfolio, like you start and you create a project every single year of school or then after, and then you have such a big body of work that you start really discarding it. And at some point, there are projects that no one will see or remember, or they will not change the world in any way. So I think accepting that not everything that you do matters, and
My God.
that gives you more place for failure too, because like
Yeah,
no
yeah.
one's gonna know. And then so that's like the less positive message, I guess.
In a weird way, that was actually super positive.
Yeah. And then and then the other one, I think for me, making changes locally, and I've always believed in starting smaller. And in the last few years, I started a few projects with friends, and I've always seen them grow. They never ended with a small thing. They always had a part two or lead into meeting new people or engaging in new projects. So I think just like seeing how certain small things that I start with now will escalate in the next 50 years is super exciting. And we'll see where they go.
Yeah, this was great. I love this conversation. I think for me, like, I guess in the meta way, like no matter what this podcast does, like it's given me a really good excuse to talk to people more often than I get to. And it's so funny because like I think in our friendships, adult friendships, there's a lot of like, can I call you Tuesday, 5 p.m.? No, okay, 7. Can I pencil you in at 12 tomorrow? Like the podcast has become a little bit of that too, but like it's so good because like I get to talk to Carolina more and I'm getting to get to know Veronica a lot more. And it's been super fun. Like I feel like I've learned so much about Vero just from the conversation in terms of how she thinks and also Carolina too, like and Robbie. Like I think every time I talk to people in
Yeah,
this
likewise.
way, it's like a learning thing and it's just super fun. So I just I just wanted to share that. But with
No, I
that,
agree.
Robbie will do the honors.
Okay, fine. Thank you everyone for tuning into this episode. We just have one more to go. We hope you really enjoyed our conversations. Of course, this is a very huge topic that we could talk so much more about. Like, subscribe, show some love, leave a positive
Don't be
comment.
shy.
Yeah, and treat yourself to a good meal today. This was a hard conversation. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you guys. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Thanks for having us.